Welcome back to Notebook Check, where we've got the HP Omen 17, or at least a version of it. This one is the Core i5 version. It is 1,300 euros of gaming laptop with a 17-inch Full HD screen, SSD, hard drive, and a GTX 1060 inside. So in comparison with the version we tested at the end of last year, which was the high-end model for 1,800 euros, that had the GTX 1070, that had an NVMe SSD, and that also had a Core i7 inside. This one at 1,300 euros is interesting because we found out that it can play pretty much every game in Full HD and most at high settings. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the test results we got in our Notebook Check test. We'll take a look around the device, give you some score breakdowns and some performance test results during the video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. But first, take a look around the HP Omen 17. Right, let's start with the weight. 3.3 kilos. This is not a light device. It is pretty heavy, it's pretty thick, but in the class of devices, and you'll see on our Notebook Check test review, we've got a number of devices we've compared it against. It's not too bad. It's towards the higher end of that weight spectrum. 2.8 to 3.4 kilos is what you'd expect for a device of this power. Now, it has got a 90 plus watt hour battery inside. You can access the insides, by the way, I'll show you that later. But that means you're getting reasonable battery life. We'll take a look at the battery life figures later. But first, let's have a look around the device. I'll show you the ports. We'll think about the screen, the keyboard, and then we'll go into some of the performance test results. Worth mentioning that we haven't got a USB-C on here, but we do have 3 USB 3.0 ports. We've got separate headphone and microphone input on this side. We've got the fan output port. Now, during my tests this afternoon, the fan has been running all the time. It is a deep noise, but it can be annoying if you're in a silent room. So bear in mind that fan is running all the time. On this side, we've got power, we've got a gigabit Ethernet port, HDMI, there's the other 2 USB 3 ports, and we've got the display port there. SD card slot there, and in our tests we got over 60 megabytes per second read and transfer speed, so reasonable, not up there with the incredible 200 megabytes per second that we got on the MSI GT72 last week, but 60 megabytes per second, probably acceptable if you're transferring Full HD 4K videos, copying over some gaming files there. On the underside, you've got fan input ports there. There's no more ports on that side. Nothing on the front as well, so that's fairly plain. And then going to the back, let's take a look at this little access port here. You can directly access the memory. It's pretty difficult actually to get this access port off. It takes a little bit of playing around to get it off, but you can actually remove the whole back cover. Take a look at that picture and you'll see you can access the SSD, which in this model is a SATA 3 version. It's not the NVMe version that you'll find in the high-end Core i7 version of this. That's one of the corners that have been cut to save a few dollars, a few euros on this model. You'll also be able to access the 1 terabyte spinning hard drive, the Wi-Fi card. That battery is fixed in. You won't be able to remove that, of course, without screws and cables being undone. You can also access the memory banks as well, but of course you'll be able to access that through the memory access port on the back. It's a reasonable finish on the outside of this HP. It's trying to be a carbon fiber finish. It's a little rubberized pattern on this, a mesh pattern on this, and a non-rubberized pattern on the plastic part here. A little bit fingerprint friendly, but that's to be expected from a plastic finished device. Before I talk about the screen, let's talk about the keyboard. Now, it's red backlight here, single color. Keyboards are reasonable. There's a good 1+ millimeter of throw slightly different graphics on top of the keycaps, which might put you off. Separate numeric keypad on the right, and I like the keyboard overall. It's a really nice feel and mechanics to the keyboard. The touchpad, however, I didn't really feel it was, number one, big enough, and number two, it has this mechanical sound to it, this clicky sound to it, which is quite annoying, certainly if you're working in a quiet room. I think most of you are probably going to end up using a mouse anyway, an external mouse anyway, so that's probably not too much of a problem for you, but just bear that in mind with the touchpad there. Let's take a look at that screen now. It is a matte IPS Full HD screen with reasonable characteristics. Contrast over 1000:1, and the color calibration out of the box wasn't too bad as well. You see the figures, the delta figures there. Anything tending towards 2 is perfect, near perfect. Anything going up over 5 is a little bit inaccurate in terms of color calibration. sRGB color range wasn't 100%, so there's not a massive range of colors, but it's much better than sort of mainstream multimedia laptops and some of the cheap laptops you can find out there. So for the price, actually not a bad screen at all. Brightness in the middle over 300 nits, so that's no problem indoors. Good contrast, and that matte display might mean you'll get some use of it outdoors, but it's not up there with the best in terms of screen brightness. Check out the full review for some more tests, including our pulse width modulation test and the reaction time test for the screen. Right, some performance tests for you. This is really important now because we're down to the Core i5 quad-core processor here, which doesn't have hyper-threading. So only 4 threads at a time on this. So that's quite a bit of a difference to some of the higher-end models out there, which will run up to 8 threads. Having said that, single core performance pretty good. When I compared it to 2 generations older quad core Core i7, this was beating it without any problems at all. So we've got a fair bit of processing power there. The GPU is permanently on. You can't switch back to the Intel graphics there. So that's going to give you a hit on some of the battery life performance figures. More about that later in the review. So what did we see in terms of Cinebench performance scores? The single 64-bit test came in at 11% slower than the Core i7 version. So that when we get to the quad-core test, things are a little bit different. Because of that 4-thread limit, the CPU, Cinebench R15 multi-CPU test was coming in at only 464 points, so 32% less than the Core i7 version, which was coming in at 679 points. So if you're really concerned with CPU processing, bear that in mind. This is a 4-thread Core i5 and not an 8-thread Core i7. It's also the Skylake version and not the latest Kaby Lake version. When we get to the PC Mark 8 scores, the scores here were only 3% down on that Core i7 version. So when we take things like GPU, SSD, and CPU performance, and then sort of level out those scores, we're getting close to the scores of the Core i7 version. Let me give you a few score figures on the SSD. It is SATA 3 connected, not NVMe, but you can swap that out for an NVMe to get even more performance out of this. So it's up close to the best performance you can get out of SATA 3 with a 500 megabyte per second maximum read speed, and 4K read and write speeds, which are reasonable. 4K write, 76.14 megabytes. 3D Mark 11 scores on the Core i7 version are a bit better than this. This one comes down at around 30% less power on the 3D Mark 11 test, but when you take a look at the gaming test results we did, you'll see a lot of green there. In fact, pretty much all green. That means full HD, almost up to max settings for every game we tested. I tested Rise of the Tomb Raider, and don't forget this is a 75 Hertz G-Sync screen on here, and I got the full 75 Hertz out of it on full HD high settings. So that is good, and that really is the point here. This is 1,300 euros and you're still getting full coverage on gaming. A quick talk about the heat and the noise. Now I mentioned the fan on this. It is on all the time and it is audible. It's not extremely loud. Our measurements saw it up to 44 in standby settings and 54, which is a little bit annoying, under full load. So bear in mind, under gaming, you will be able to hear that speaker. Heat max load up to 45.5 degrees. Top right, top left are the areas that will get hot on this, but that's not too much to worry about under full load. We did see a little bit of throttling under full load, but nothing to be worried about because our full load test is extremely heavy CPU and GPU load test. The one thing you do want to take note of though is that under battery power, this downclocks and you can't clock it up. It will downclock to much lower, 1.8 to 1.9 on the CPU and 1.6 gigahertz on the GPU. Built-in speakers on the HP Omen 17 are not too bad. Of course, it's missing a bit of bass, and when I compare it to the MSI GT72 that I had a look at last week, it's not quite in that league in terms of full rounded bass performance, but it's not bad. You'll certainly enjoy it for YouTube, and you'll certainly enjoy it for some streaming radio. There are battery life figures there from that 95.8 watt hour battery, surfing over Wi-Fi, 6 hours. Big Buck Bunny, our video test there at 150 nits, 5 hours 13 minutes. Under load, 2 hours 25 minutes. That's a little bit more than we've seen, but bear in mind that it's throttling down under battery power. So that's the HP Omen 17. I like it. I think it's got good price performance ratio. The screen is good, the keyboard's good, the touchpad not so good, battery power, well, this is a device that's going to sit on your desk with mains connected if you want to get the best out of it. Not just for gaming, but for video editing as well. I think this is a reasonable device to have in a studio for video editing and photographic work as well. Don't forget to check out the full review on notebookcheck.net where we scored it 82%, 8.2 out of 10, so that's a pretty good score. And definitely if you're looking at something around the 1,000 to 1,500 mark for gaming, for something that's going to last you a couple of years as a student laptop, if you're looking at video editing, some creative work as well, definitely worth looking at. There's really not too much to worry about. I'm going to leave you with the pros and cons there, and I'll ask you to not forget to give a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more out of notebookcheck.net videos. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.